The night Michael decided to change his life did not look special at all. There was no dramatic music, no sudden miracle, no powerful speech echoing in the background. Just a quiet room, a dim yellow light, and a young man sitting on the edge of his bed staring at the floor like he had run out of answers. If you have ever felt stuck in your own life, like days are moving but nothing is changing, stay with this story for a moment. Because what happened to Michael might slowly change the way you see your own future. And before we go deeper, if stories like this speak to something inside you, take 1 second to like this video and subscribe to English Star Story. Because every story here is created to remind you that no life is ever truly hopeless. Michael was not lazy in the way people usually imagine. He had dreams. Real dreams. The kind that keep you awake at night thinking about a better future. The problem was not dreaming. The problem was doing. Every morning he promised himself he would start fresh, wake up early, work hard, focus, change everything. But when morning actually came, the promises felt heavy and the bed felt safe. So he stayed where he was. One more day, then another, and slowly, without noticing, years of his life disappeared into routine, comfort, and quiet disappointment. From the outside, nothing looked terribly wrong. He had a small job that paid just enough to survive. A tiny apartment in a crowded building where the walls were thin and the future felt thinner. People around him were moving forward step by step, while he felt like he was standing on the same square of ground watching time pass him by. The hardest part was not failure. The hardest part was the feeling that he was capable of more, but unable to prove it. Late at night, when the world became quiet, his thoughts became loud. Questions kept repeating in his mind. Why am I not changing? What is wrong with me? Why does everything feel harder for me than for everyone else? Those questions did not have easy answers, and the silence after them felt even heavier. One cold morning, after barely sleeping, Michael walked to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror longer than usual. His eyes looked tired, but not just from lack of sleep. Tired from waiting, tired from hoping without acting, tired from telling himself that someday things would magically improve. And in that quiet moment, a small, uncomfortable truth rose inside him. Nothing will change, unless I change. That sentence was not exciting. It was not motivational. It was simple, almost boring. But sometimes, the most powerful truths arrive without emotion. They just sit in front of you and wait for you to either accept them or ignore them, like always. For the first time, Michael did not look away from that truth. He did not create a huge life plan. He did not write 10 goals on a wall. He only made one small decision that sounded almost meaningless. Tomorrow, I wake up at 6. No matter what. That was it. No drama. No inspiration. Just a quiet rule. The next morning felt like a battle nobody else could see. His alarm rang in the dark, and immediately his mind started negotiating. Sleep more. Start next week. One day won't matter. Those thoughts felt reasonable, comfortable, familiar. They were the same thoughts that had controlled his life for years. But something tiny had shifted inside him. Not confidence, not motivation. Just a thin line of determination, weak, but real. His body felt heavy as he pushed the blanket away. Sitting up in bed took more effort than it should have. For a few seconds he just sat there breathing slowly, like someone learning how to stand again after falling for a long time. And in that quiet second, something invisible happened. Nothing changed outside. But inside, a new identity took its first breath. A man who keeps his word, even when nobody is watching. That first morning was not productive. He did not suddenly become successful. He just sat by the window holding a warm cup of cheap coffee, watching the sky slowly turn from black to gray. But the feeling inside him was new. Small. Calm. Unfamiliar. And control. The second morning was harder. The third morning, even harder. Discipline did not feel powerful. It felt repetitive and lonely. No one clapped. No one noticed. And this is where most people stop, because the beginning of discipline is painfully quiet. But Michael kept going. Not perfectly. Some days, he failed. Some alarms were ignored. Some nights he fell back into old habits. The difference now was not perfection. The difference was return. Every time he slipped, he came back faster, and every return made him slightly stronger than before. Weeks passed, and small changes started connecting like pieces of a puzzle. Waking early gave him extra time. Extra time allowed short walks. Walks cleared his thinking. Clear thinking made work easier. Easier work built confidence. Confidence created energy, and energy made discipline feel less like punishment and more like progress. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the strange part. Movies teach us that change is loud and fast. Real life whispers and moves slowly. So slowly that if you are not careful, you might miss the miracle happening right in front of you. Months later, something unexpected appeared. An opportunity. Small, simple, easy to ignore. Extra responsibility at work. The old Michael would have avoided it. Responsibility meant effort. Effort meant risk. Risk meant possible failure. But discipline had quietly changed the way he saw himself. So instead of stepping back, he stepped forward. He worked longer, focused deeper, complained less, finished earlier. Not because he felt amazing, but because discipline had taught him something powerful. Feelings are temporary. Actions are what shape reality. The results were not immediate, but they were real. People began to trust him more, not loudly, just quietly. And trust is one of the first rewards discipline gives you. If you are still listening right now, this part matters the most. Michael's life did not change because of one big moment. It changed because of hundreds of small moments nobody will ever see. The mornings he wanted to quit but didn't. The nights he chose growth instead of comfort. The days he felt nothing and still continued. That is the true face of discipline. Not exciting, not glamorous, but unbelievably powerful over time. And this was only the beginning of his transformation, because soon life would test him in a way discipline alone could not solve. And the choice he would face next would decide whether all his progress was real or just temporary. The first real test of Michael's discipline did not arrive as an opportunity. It arrived as a loss. One quiet afternoon, without warning, the small stability he had started building suddenly cracked. The company where he worked announced sudden cuts. Projects stopped. Positions disappeared. Names were called into an office one by one. When Michael heard his own name, something deep inside him already knew what was coming. The conversation was short, polite words. Careful tone. Final decision. By the time he walked out of the building, holding a thin envelope that felt heavier than anything he had ever carried, the cold air outside felt different. Not just colder, emptier. For a few long minutes, he stood on the sidewalk, watching strangers pass by, each one busy with a life that seemed to be moving forward while his had just been pushed backward again. Old thoughts tried to return immediately. See, nothing really changes. You tried, and it still failed. What's the point of discipline if life can destroy everything in one moment? Months earlier, those thoughts would have won. Months earlier, he would have gone home, closed the curtains, and slowly slipped back into the quiet comfort of giving up. But something inside him was no longer the same. The loss still hurt. The fear was still real. The uncertainty was still heavy. Discipline does not remove pain. It changes how long pain controls you. That night, sitting again on the edge of his bed in the same dim yellow light where part one of this story began, Michael felt the familiar silence around him. But this time the silence was different. It was not empty. It was waiting. For the first time, he asked himself a new question. Not why is this happening to me, but what am I supposed to do next?
That single shift in thinking is where real strength begins. The next morning, the alarm rang at 6. For a brief second, his mind whispered, "You lost your job. Sleep doesn't matter now." In that moment, that tiny invisible moment, was more important than the job itself. Because if he turned off the alarm, the old life would quietly return. But if he stood up, even without a job, discipline would prove it was real. So he stood up, not because he felt hopeful, not because he felt strong, but because he had decided the kind of man he wanted to be. Discipline means keeping your identity even when circumstances fall apart. That morning he didn't know what to do with his future, so he focused on the only thing he could control. The next hour, he walked outside while the streets were still quiet. Cold air, slow steps, steady breathing, and with each step, fear lost a little of its power. Days passed, then weeks. Finding new work was harder than he expected. Rejections came, mails without replies. Interviews that ended with polite smiles and silent endings. Each rejection felt like a small weight added to his chest. But here's the truth most people never see. Discipline is not proven when life is easy. Discipline is proven when nothing is working, and you continue anyway. Instead of collapsing, Michael built a routine around uncertainty. Morning exercise to protect his mind. Hours of learning to improve his skills. Applications sent, even when hope felt low. Reading at night instead of escaping into distraction. Progress was invisible. But invisible progress is still progress. One evening after another rejection, frustration finally broke through. For the first time in months, anger filled his chest. He wanted to quit. Not loudly, just quietly. The dangerous kind of quitting that looks like rest but slowly becomes surrender. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at nothing. And then a memory returned to him. It's that first morning by the window. That small feeling of control. It's that quiet promise to himself. And he realized something powerful. Discipline was never about the job. It was about the man he was becoming. Jobs can disappear. Money can disappear. Opportunities can disappear. But the identity you build through discipline, that stays. That night, instead of quitting, he made a deeper decision than ever before. Not I will try again, but I will not go back to who I used to be, no matter how long this takes. That sentence changed everything. Because when quitting is no longer an option, time stops being your enemy. It starts becoming your partner. Months later, something small happened. So small most people would ignore it. Short freelance task. Temporary. Low pay. No guarantee. But discipline had trained him to respect small beginnings, so he gave it full effort. He worked carefully, delivered early, improved details nobody asked him to improve. Days later, another task came, then another, then a longer project. Nothing dramatic, just quiet doors opening one by one. And that is how real life usually changes, not explosions, but slow, steady unlocking. A year after losing his job, Michael stood in a place that once felt impossible again. Stable work, stronger income, clear direction, but more important than all of it, completely different mind. Fear still visited sometimes. Doubt still whispered occasionally. But now, they were only visitors. They were no longer in control. Because discipline had given him something greater than success. It gave him self-trust. And once a person truly trusts himself, life can shake him, but it cannot break him. Years later, when people looked at Michael's life, they saw confidence, stability, calm, strength. They called him lucky, they called him talented, they called him successful, but none of them saw the early mornings in silence, the walks with heavy thoughts, the rejections without witnesses, the nights he almost quit, and didn't. That is always the hidden story behind strength. So if you are listening right now and feeling behind in life, feeling lost, feeling like nothing is changing, remember this: Michael did not change his life in one day. He changed it in hundreds of days nobody applauded. And that means something powerful for you. It means you are not stuck. You are not too late. You are not broken. You might simply be one disciplined decision away from a completely different future. Not tomorrow morning, not next year, but slowly, quietly, and permanently. Before this story ends, take one honest second with yourself. Ask, what is one small action I will repeat every day? Even when I don't feel like it? Write it in the comments. Your decision might inspire someone else who is silently struggling right now. And if this story reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to like this video. Share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to English or Tant's Ta Story, because the next story might arrive exactly when you need it most. Because in the end, discipline didn't just change Michael's life. It revealed the strength that was waiting inside him all along. And maybe the next life it changes will be yours.